Texas.
Pursuant to House Resolution 838, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Self, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, I rise in support of my amendment, which would prohibit funds from going toward implementing, administering, or enforcing the Equity Action Plan of the Department of Housing and Urban Development. This plan clearly violates the federal civil rights law that has been in place since the 1960s. The intent of the Fair Housing Act is clear: to prevent, and I quote, discrimination in the sale, rental, and financing of dwellings based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, and disability. In other words, individuals with the financial means to rent or purchase a home cannot be discriminated against. Unfortunately, the executive order signed by President Biden and the Equity Action Plan laid out by the Department of Housing and Urban Development stretches the definition of fair housing far beyond the original intent of Congress. This administration has twisted the definition of the word equity to mean the exact opposite of fair and impartial treatment under the law. Equity is the administration's way of manipulating the rule of law to offer preferential treatment to various constituency groups. Rather than addressing the merits of those in need, the administration is conjuring up groups of individuals who have been assigned a predetermined victimhood status. I reserve.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Mr. Chair, I claim time in opposition.
The gentleman is recognized.
Again, it has to be pointed out that there's a level of being completely ridiculous that two straight white men are debating all the issues of equality and equity as if we have faced them all our lives. We can't be the judge of the jury in this country on who should be served by the federal government. And while we're probably not the best people to speak on the issue, let's try to make clear what I think my colleagues are really saying. What they're really saying is they don't like diversity, and they absolutely don't like inclusion. They don't want to address discrimination against people of color, LGBTQ people, and people with disabilities. They don't want to build a nation that supports people at the greatest risk of homelessness. Not caring allows them to ignore this insurmountable problem, but it doesn't make it less real. It's not radical to want to build a country that is welcoming to all people from different backgrounds. But they do want you to believe that our country has reckoned with its history of discrimination. They want you to believe that these issues are things of the distant past. They are wrong. They are attempting to legislate away those who look, think, or feel differently. That's not American. That's authoritarianism. I oppose this amendment. And I reserve.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to yield 1 minute to my good friend from Montana, Mr. Rosendale.
Thank you very much.
The gentleman from Montana is recognized.
Thank you very much, my good friend from Texas. I rise today to express my deep concern about the Biden administration's Equity Action Plan at the Department of Housing and Urban Development. We must ensure that American tax dollars allocated to HUD are spent based on financial need and readiness, not Democrats' divisive social justice agenda. These equity action plans direct the department to give special attention to individuals based on their race, or if they identify as transgender or gender nonconforming. These criteria have no place in providing affordable housing and ending homelessness. Helping Americans out of homelessness or helping them to buy their first home should be based on only preparedness and credit worthiness. Anything else does them a disservice in the long run, as evidenced by the housing collapse of 2008, which was the result of unscrupulous promotion of subprime loans. It is a fundamental tenet of our republic that we treat all Americans equally, regardless of their race or creed. If any American is struggling, they should have equal access to assistance. The Department of Housing and Urban Development should support those who are in need and ready to receive help,
gentleman's time has expired.
No need for an equity plan.
Additional 30 seconds.
The gentleman from Montana is recognized for an additional 30 seconds.
The Department of Housing and Urban Development should support those who are in need and ready to receive or help. No need for equity action plans. I urge my colleagues to support Congressman Self's amendment, and I yield back to the gentleman from Texas.
Gentleman yields. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
When considering the mission of this equity action plan, it becomes clear that instead of rewarding people based on their merits, the government is attempting to pick winners and losers. This policy would negatively impact Americans by creating the potential of another housing crisis, as my good friend mentioned, and exacerbating existing problems embedded in our economy. I reserve.
Gentleman from Texas reserves. Gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, again, in a moment of self-awareness, a bunch of straight white guys talking about social justice. And when did social justice agenda become a bad thing? Again, who am I to say, but weren't the leaders of the civil rights movement leading a social justice agenda? And does anyone imagine that that notion that we read about as you go down to the archives, that toward a more perfect union, does anyone think that we've met that and that you can't, and that housing and transportation have to be fundamental toward the ends of that agenda that we talked about? In the end, wasn't Lincoln saying 87 years ago, every once in a while we have to ask ourselves, did we really mean it when we said that we were all created equal? We have to ask ourselves that today. We still have a long way to go, and it runs through all our systems, including our transportation and our housing systems. It's not a bad word. Someone needs to stand up to you when you do this. It's wrong. This amendment is wrong. This bill is horrible because of these things. I oppose it. I encourage my colleagues to do the same, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Let me be very clear. We're discussing an executive order here. If this is so important, Mr. Speaker, bring a bill to the floor of the House. Do not give us an executive order. It is clear that this executive action plan will be rejected by the courts because it is in violation of the 14th Amendment. This administration is clearly attempting to hide under layers of bureaucratic red tape and in the process grow the administrative state and erode the power that voters have invested in this body. This action plan is in fact so radical that it earned the endorsement of Marxists who openly proclaim, and I quote, "keep dismantling the organizing principle of this society." We should not fund this initiative. It is time for Congress to do its job by directing taxpayer dollars to priorities that affect all of our constituents. I urge the passage of my amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Texas yields. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I ask for a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Oklahoma seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee do now rise.
The question is on the motion that the committee rise. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the committee rises.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Madam, the Committee of the Whole House and the State of the Union, having had under consideration H.R. 4820, directs me to report that it has come to no resolution thereon.
The Chair of the Committee of the Whole on the State of the Union reports that the committee has had under consideration H.R. 4820 and has come to no resolution thereon. The chair announces the speaker's appointment pursuant to 20 U.S.C. 2103B in the order of the House of January 9th, 2023 of the following individual to the Board of Trustees of the American Folk Life Center in the Library of Congress on the part of the House for a term of 6 years.
Ms. Amy Kitchener of Fresno, California.
The chair announces the speaker's appointment pursuant to 10 U.S.C. 7455A and the order of the House of January 9th, 2023 of the following members on the part of the House to the Board of Visitors to the